Okay, here we are. Here we are. Hello, my friend, and welcome to another episode of I Love Being Sober, sponsored by Camelback Recovery, Arizona's preferred mental health and addiction treatment option to help people get on the path or stay on the path to recovery. My name is Tim Westbrook, and I'm the CEO and founder of Camelback Recovery here in the always sunny and always sober Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have helped thousands of people to stop their suffering and continue on their path to recovery. The purpose of this podcast is to come clean with all the misinformation that's out there about recovery, addiction treatment, mental illness, and the strategies to thrive in life. Visit camelbackrecovery.com to learn more about our treatment strategies for alcoholism, drug addiction, or mental illness. And we even offer recovery coaching so that you can enjoy the freedom and happiness you've always searched for. Today, I'm here with Tom O'Connor, and we're going to talk about his experience, strength, and hope. Tom has 23 years in recovery, mostly in AA, with some time spent in adult children of alcoholics as well, ACA. He sponsored many men, and he has brought meetings into rehabs, juvenile hall, and other facilities. He has experience in addressing childhood and adult trauma, attending several programs at the Meadows in Arizona, as well as utilizing other modalities. Tom is the youngest of 9 children in a family with 5 siblings in active recovery. Tom, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thanks so much for having me.
Definitely. So there's 9 siblings. So let's, I guess we can dig in. I'm just so grateful that you're here. You and I met at a Bo Eason event not long ago, and I heard part of your story, which is, you following 6 stories. So stick around if you want to hear Tom's story of experience, strength, and hope, and his bottom. Really, I mean, it's just an amazing story, and it's so awesome that you're here today. And so I want to dig into it. I want to find out, okay, tell me about your upbringing. Nine children in your family. Tell me about your upbringing. Where'd you grow up?
Sure. I grew up in Long Island, New York, a town called Garden City. And it was, middle class. And, we called it the CIA, Catholic Irish Alcoholics. Lots of families had, real big families. And, it was good. It was, I grew up in I was born in the mid 60s and grew up in the 70s and 80s.
Okay. And you had 9 siblings. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So that's definitely part of my story. Lots of, I would say, dysfunction at early ages, and, dysfunction that spilled into, alcohol and drugs, and, probably saw a lot of things as a young kid that I shouldn't have seen. And, some of that impacted me negatively. Some things I was probably scared a little straight with. So, it's been amazing though, in sobriety, having an entirely new relationship with my siblings, many of whom were older than me that I didn't know very well growing up.
When did you first have your first drink, or what was your first experience?
Yeah, my first experience was just, probably drinking warm beer in some friend's backyard, and, age, 14, kind of, going into high school, and we got efficient pretty quickly, and, was, drinking on a regular basis on the weekends. And, my older brothers, not only smoked pot, but they dealt pot. So it was kind of like a candy store, swimming around the room and trying to, finding plastic bags and ski boots and stuff. So, that was, it definitely accelerated my drinking, and, started out smoking weed and spilled into other things.
When did you notice that alcohol and drugs was a problem, or that you were an alcoholic?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, from the get-go, I was a sprinter. So I would have, 4, 5, 6 beers, weighing 100, 120 pounds in the first hour, and blacking out a lot, getting in fights with my friends, and I was kind of this timid, sensitive kid that was a little fearful, every day. And then, I would get the beer muscles real quickly, and then I would use the excuse of, I was drunk, I don't remember. And for the longest time, I thought that was a plausible, like, get out of jail free card. And, not everybody else saw it that way.
Now, did you go tell me about so after high school, then what happened after high school?
So after high school, I went away to college. Irish Catholic kid growing up in Long Island. My dad went to University of Notre Dame. I had a picture of the Notre Dame campus over my bed growing up on my wall. It was my childhood dream. My grandmother didn't have much money, and she saved what she could to help, and took student loans, and my mom did everything. And I went away there, and due to alcoholism and that type of behavior, within 6 months, I was kicked off campus. And within a year, I was asked to take a leave of absence. So then I ended up going to 3 different colleges and graduated, and just so much alcoholism and drug addiction that really took off during college years.
Did all of your siblings did most of your siblings go to college?
No, I was the first one I was the first one in my family to go to 4-year college. I mean, many of them did that later in life, but I was, I guess I was blessed on many levels, because my dad had passed away. It's part of my story, which I'll tell in a few minutes. But my dad had passed away when I was young, and my mom remarried, and my stepfather was a terrific man, and he was well off. And so I had some opportunities that my older siblings did not have.
Oh, okay. And then, so after college, then you started on a career.
Yeah.
Tell me about your career early on in your career before you hit your bottom.
Yeah. Early on in my career, I mean, the advantage to growing up the way I did in kind of a, middle class, but, definitely working class, and especially with a single parent, I worked since age 10. And so I worked, delivered newspapers, shoveled snow. I just did stuff my whole life. So I got out of school, and, I had decent grades, but many at the time, it was 1988, and, the movie Wall Street had come out in 1986, and, and I was good with math. So I was always good in math, and that I was a finance major in business administration in college. And so I just got a job on the ground level. And, I knew how to be around people, having older siblings and having worked around a lot of older people. So I was able to matriculate pretty quickly, worked my way up through the ranks, and got a lot of responsibility quickly. And, on some level, it was the worst thing for a thriving alcoholic, to have some professional success, because that as time went on, that masked the, deterioration in my personal life.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of people that I know of that are professionally, they're success, on the outside, it looks like they're successful. So it seems like you're successful and your life is going well because you have a job, you're performing at your job, you're probably working hard and playing hard, I would imagine, that's what I did as well. So life wasn't falling apart. You weren't homeless drinking out of a paper bag. Like, you had resources, you had money, you had responsibilities, you had people that looked up to you, but you were also a raging alcoholic.
Yeah. And I often, when I tell my story or share at meetings, I often say it was almost like a seesaw. So the better my professional life got, the lower I went in my personal life, because there was this justification that, I wear a suit to work, I get up and go in every day. A lot of times I hadn't slept. And I was, I was in my suit, buying drugs in some alley in Harlem, at 3:00 in the morning the night before, but I was at work and I looked good, and, and I could clean up quickly. I was what I labeled my mother, which was a functional alcoholic. I could hold it together until I couldn't, because I think for all of us with this disease, it's just not sustainable. The wheels come off the cart at some point.
Mm-hmm. They do.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me what happened.
Sure. We talked a little bit about my background. I'm the youngest of 9 children. Mom was a raging alcoholic. I lost dad to pancreatic cancer when I was 12. And at that point, I vowed never to rely on anyone ever again. I end up working on Wall Street. I'm a self-made millionaire at 30. By day, I'm randomly smashing phones and screaming at anyone who I deem full of shit on the trading floor. At night, I'm drinking top shelf liquor at the Waldorf Hotel bar. on my broker's tab, and I'm sitting courtside at Knicks games. Life certainly appeared like it was going well, and I really thought I was hot shit.
Yeah.
You know, one night in September of 1995, I attend a group dinner at Sparks Steakhouse in New York City. I pound Sierra Nevadas. I start drinking Absolute vodka. After dinner, my buddy Pete puts out his hand and says, "Want to take some magic mushrooms? They taste disgusting." 30 minutes later, I'm paranoid and panicked. I stumble into the street, race to my girlfriend's nearby apartment. I'm banging on the door, "Let me in." There's no answer. I start kicking the door. I hear a neighbor yell, "The police are on the way." I'm like, the cops are out to get me. I got to get away. So I run to the roof. There's nowhere to hide. So I climb over the side and I hang off the ledge. And I'm hanging. And then I'm trying to swing myself back up. And I feel my fingers slipping. And I plummet 6 stories onto the concrete alley below. By a miracle, I land on my feet, but I just crumble. A neighbor heard me whiz past the window, and thank God called the police. I wake up on a gurney. I've got a shattered right foot, fractured lower spine, punctured lung, broken ribs, bruises and scratches all over my body. And all I hear is, "He's got so much alcohol in him." I leave the hospital in a wheelchair 3 weeks later, not knowing if I'm ever going to walk again. No amount of money can buy my way out of this. 3 years later, I'm married. I'm driving my infant daughter, Abigail, around while seriously buzzed. I look at her in the rearview mirror and I think, I'm just like my mom. And that's when I started attending AA meetings, which my kids would call my daddy better meetings. I ended up living a sober life in service, learning to put others first. For the first time since childhood, something good was filling up the void inside. And, you know, today I'm married to my soulmate, Janine, who I married on a mission trip to Zambia, gotten very involved in philanthropic work, and, you know, life is amazing. And so, you know, it all started in the rooms of AA.
So you got sober 23 years ago. So that was when the accident happened. You fall 6 stories.
Yeah.
And how long did it take for you to recover?
Yeah. So, and this is what's amazing. I mean, the healing body of the healing power of the human body, but also the fact that, you know, the jury's still out whether I fell or jumped off a 6-story building, right?
Yeah, right.
Because it was a little hazy at the time. You know, I'm in my hospital room the next day and I am totally bust up. And I got a room full of my drinking buddies that are joking, like, "Hey, what happened to you? When are you going to be better?" So it was like nobody stopped and said to me, "Hey, man, maybe you got a real problem here. You need to do something about it." Right. And so that was who I surrounded myself with. So the physical recovery took about 6 months to where I was really up and around. I was in a wheelchair. I didn't know if I was going to walk. I was drinking and drugging before I was out of the wheelchair. I mean, you know, I would go from the foxhole prayers at night of, "Oh God, if you get me out of this one, I'll really toe the line." And then as soon as I, you know, got a little bit of good news that, you know, my back was going to heal and I was going to be able to walk again, you know, I was right back to the old things. So how
long did you continue drinking and drugging after that accident?
After that event, for a little over 3 years. And what it took was having a 6-month-old daughter who every time I held her, she cried because I just had so much anxiety and I hated myself. And the other thing was that the job went away. There was a merger. I took a severance package. I tried to move 100 miles away to the end of Long Island thinking I'm going to get myself sober. And all I did was drink alone.
Yeah. You know, it's, as they say, this disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And we can't do it on our own. And I was in a major car accident in 1996. And I remember everybody said, "Oh my gosh, you know, now Tim's going to learn like this, you know, God kept him alive to help other people." And at the time I was like, God didn't keep me alive. I'm alive because I'm alive. I got this painting business that kept me alive, and I drank and drugged. I mean, my drinking escalated to drug use for 15 more years. I mean, and every, people were over there scratching their heads going, oh my gosh. And, I have a good friend of mine who was a very good friend. His wife reached out to me a few weeks ago, and she basically set some boundaries and said, you can't drink, because he's still out drinking and drugging. And he ended up drinking himself to he had a heart attack. I still don't even know the whole story, but he's in ICU currently at this very moment in time. Sorry. And his wife reached out to me, and his ex-wife reached out to me as well. They all reached out to me. I used to be the guy that, the wife, the mom, the parent, like nobody wanted their kid or their loved one to hang out with me. And now I'm the guy that they can, and now it's completely changed. Now I'm the guy they reach out to when they need help. And they're like, oh my gosh, let's call Tim. And so what I told his wife was, listen, just because he's in ICU and just because he almost lost his life doesn't mean that he's going to get sober. Yeah. Like he's send him to inpatient treatment, send him to rehab. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Go straight to rehab, because people can't get sober on their own. And it doesn't really matter how the outside world can see how crazy it is what they just went through. And it's like, oh my God, he's definitely going to get sober. Now, like you fell from 6 stories. Oh, he's of course, but to your point, you are the average of the people that you hang out with. So your buddies weren't in support of you getting clean and sober. They just, whatever. Yeah.
And, I left out a lot of stuff around my story, lots of cocaine and hallucinogens and, crazy. I mean, the reality is I probably almost died, a half a dozen times in New York City. So it was a crazy life, and, just amazing in sobriety. I got sober when I was 33, and I'm 57 now. And it's been amazing because while I, at the time, made up that I was missing out on a bunch of life, like you just said, now I'm the, I watched 4 other people in my family get sober, and I've been able to play a role in that. Yeah. I've got countless friends who, I became the guy of, oh, you got a problem with drinking, call Tom O'Connor. And, so it went from this stigma of, oh, that guy's a loser, he doesn't drink, to, hey, that guy's got something going on, and if you have a problem, he's the person to talk to.
How does that feel?
It's amazing. I mean, I would tell you that, it's been gradual during the course of my sobriety, but especially in the last few years, being of service to others. I retired from I had a long career in finance, very successful, and I retired a couple of years ago, and it was terrifying because it was like my identity was taken away. Yeah. And yet now I've got a lot of time. And so I've sponsored men throughout, but I'm sponsoring more men. I bring a meeting into a treatment center, every Monday. I started a meeting at a homeless shelter during COVID out here in Nashville, Tennessee, where I live. And that was just amazing. I mean, I was on the phone with a guy yesterday who was a homeless guy who I met there, and I couldn't do the meeting every week. So he started filling in for me. He now has 20 months. And he's the house manager at a sober living house. And just to talk to this guy, I'm like, the power of this program is incredible. So you can see the light in my eyes. I love watching people get sober. I love watching the light go on. But beyond that, like putting down drugs and alcohol it's a huge step. It's a big step for a lot of people. For me, a critical thing was to look at what was the reason why I was drinking and drugging. And a lot of that was childhood stuff that I was holding on to, resentments, anger, and then even adult, I had a lot of self-induced adult trauma, with divorce and, lots of just work stress and other things. So I had an opportunity, as you mentioned, to go to ACA, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics, and take a look. It's, AA and the 12 steps are amazing. And yet there's lots of opportunities to go deeper.
Who is ACA appropriate for? Because I know quite a few people that are very involved with ACA, and they said it's been a massive compliment to their program of recovery. Yeah,
and again, this is just a friend of mine put it really well, which is, AA. She looked at it as AA was like undergraduate, and ACA was like graduate school. Okay. Because it was just, and the important thing about ACA is it's for people from alcoholic or dysfunctional families. So your parents don't have to have been an alcoholic for you to go to these meetings, because lots of us grew up in dysfunctional homes, and sometimes alcoholism even skips a generation where the grandparents may have been alcoholic and the parents may not have been, right? So it's still in the bloodline. So, I mean, I think, again, it's AA is amazing. If you do the AA 12 steps correctly with a sponsor, you can get at a lot of this stuff. I was definitely, I don't know if I was a special case, but, I had a lot of things from my mom being alcoholic, my dad dying when I was young, felt a bit alienated from my older siblings. So I had a lot of stuff that was running me. And, going to ACA, I went to the Meadows, which has a childhood survivor workshop, which is really amazing. And, I know there's lots of those programs out there. So that was an important element. But I'll tell you, the number one reason I went there was because I had 2 kids. And at the time, my daughter was 15, my daughter Abigail, my son Liam was 11. And I was an amazing parent most of the time. But I had that fraction of the time that it was like, I don't know, the spirit of my mom would come back and I would scream at them till I had like a vein in my neck. And it would come out of nowhere. And I was like, my kids love me, but they also kind of can't stand me when I do that. So that was my motivation to go into ACA, to really take a closer look at that. Because I didn't want to alienate my kids and treat them like that, because I didn't like that from my childhood. So that was my motivation. ACA was amazing. And, part of my message, Tim, is that people, even in sobriety, I had almost 20 years sober, and I had left my career of 32 years, and I moved to New York City to be closer to my daughter. And, it was a lie. I sold my house and I changed everything. And I was going to meetings, but it was like a lot of stuff that I ran through from my whole life kind of caught up with me. And I had like a midlife crisis. And I ended up going away for 45 days for anxiety and depression in sobriety. And I know that can sound crazy to some people, but, I want people to know that you can still go through mental health stuff in sobriety. And the beautiful thing is, if you don't pick up drugs and alcohol, you actually can deal with those issues while you're not, convoluting them with the drugs and alcohol.
Well, the drugs and alcohol is the solution.
Yes.
So the easiest thing would have been just to go back to pick up a drink.
Yes. And if I wasn't going to meetings throughout, I did go to the Meadows and, went to, I had never been to NA before. I started an ACA meeting at the Meadows, which we had, me and some other folks went to AA meetings every day. So being in that container of recovery while going through some really difficult, I had insomnia for like 4 months, which, can drive you mad. And I'll tell you, at an AA meeting, at one of my worst moments, someone said, "I've never heard of someone dying from a lack of sleep." And that can sound really simple, but hearing that in an AA meeting when you haven't slept in 4 months was like, oh my God, I'm not going to die. I'm going to live through this. So many of those pearls of wisdom that came because I stayed close to the program. I worked the steps, right coming out of this whole situation. And it was amazing because it helped flush a lot of stuff out. And I had been single for 13 years and I met my wife who, she's my soulmate. I'm married to her today. And I met her coming out of that period. So it was clear there was a reason why I needed to let go of a lot of that stuff, even into sobriety.
Right. And were you sponsoring guys when you were going through all of that mental health stuff?
I was not actively sponsoring people because I was barely holding it together. But I was being sponsored. I was very close to many men in the program. That is really where I would say the fellowship for me really took over, because I had so many people that were asking about me, looking out for me. My brother, who's my best friend, but he's my sober mate. And, he brought his son to visit me at the Meadows during family week. And, that was just like the greatest feeling in the world, knowing there were people that were there for me. So AA was my bedrock throughout. I was in service before, I was in service after, but candidly, I didn't have a lot to give at that moment. Right. I was sorting myself out, but I've been in, sponsoring men and been doing lots of volunteering since then.
So how did ACA help you work through some of your childhood issues?
Yeah, ACA has its own brand of steps, and I would say there's a lot more writing and reflecting, and it's a lot more where AA, at least for me, is a little bit about making good with the world and making good with others. ACA was about really self-forgiveness and making good with myself. Okay. An example of that would be my mom lost her husband when, the kids were, we were 7 kids were still living in the house. She's a single mom. She's an alcoholic. She grew up with probably in a dysfunctional alcoholic household. And so while I had a lot of maybe understanding for the reason the way she was, I also didn't get what I needed as a kid. And I had a lot of resentment about that. So ACA was an opportunity to not just rationalize it away and say my mom did the best she could, but wow, I was a little kid and I didn't get a whole lot of lap time. I didn't get a whole lot of hugs and a whole lot of pats on the back. And that kind of fucked me up in a way. Right. And so, I want a way to process that. And ACA meetings, I think, are a little bit more about, the self-forgiveness, working the program, really looking at what came up for me, what is still kind of swimming around in here that I don't like that much, and what is preventing me from showing up for my kids and showing up for other people. So, that's a bit of it, but I think in particular, going to an ACA meeting and just hearing about the things people go through growing up, it on many levels, it also gave me gratitude because my family was challenging, but I always had a roof over my head. I always had clothes on my back. I had food to eat. And there were a lot of people that grew up they were like feral kids, they had to fend for themselves from age, 7, 8, 9.
Right. So why is it, in your experience, why is it suggested that you have to give it away in order to keep it?
Yeah, this is this is the hidden gem of, I would say, any recovery program is, whenever I'm focused on me and, I would call them my first world and my quality challenges. Right. I just don't have
my luxury problems.
Yeah, I just don't have a perspective. And yet when I work with another alcoholic and my attention is outside of me and it is on someone else, and my sole focus is being there for them, being present, listening, and I don't have the same emotional attachment to their stuff that I do to mine. Uh-huh. So I feel like I can really be of service and I can help them in ways I can't help myself. Right. And so I think that stepping outside yourself really gives an opportunity to have another perspective around things that maybe I'm going through. I love the saying, which I've heard in another program, is, what used to be problems turn into opportunities and ultimately turn into gifts, because it's all about how we look at them. Me falling off a building for a long time was a serious problem. I limp around every day. I got, right. Stuff going on in my right ankle. My back still tweaks out. And yet I know the type of alcoholic and drug addict I was at that time. I was going to die. So what did God do? He lowered me off a building. He said, I'm going to bang you up a bit, and yet you're going to walk away from this. You're going to have an amazing story to share with others, and you need to go help people. And so that's the best example for me. I don't have it in me to fly off another building. So right. I'm going to sponsor other men. I'm going to help other people. And I've just watched, I've got a couple of sponsees right now. And one of them, he was in his head, anxious guy, working, kids, all that stuff. He got a sponsee, and it's amazing. It's like his whole perspective on life has changed. He's like, hey, because it's just that gratification he's getting from being there for someone else. And all of a sudden his stuff doesn't have the same sting to it. Yeah. He's not focused on himself 24/7. He's focused on somebody else. Yeah. I got another guy who's not sponsoring people, and he's still in his head, and he's still in the problem. And I'm encouraging him to no end, like, dude, you got to go get a sponsor. You got to
go get a sponsor. You got to go be of service. You got to give it away. So first, you were talking about being in gratitude, and everything that has happened is a gift.
Yeah.
And the way I look at it is that I have to be grateful for every single thing that has happened to me.
Right.
And even at the time, falling off a 6-story building might not have seemed like a gift.
Yeah.
And you probably weren't grateful for it at the time.
No.
However, my experience, I have to be grateful for every single thing, whether it's separation, divorce, bankruptcy, car accident. I lose all my money. I lose all my homes. My girlfriend breaks up with me, like whatever it is.
Yeah.
I have to be great until I'm grateful for it.
Yeah.
I'm a victim.
Yeah.
And when I'm a victim, like, poor me, I'm a victim. This happened to me. Well, you would drink too if what happened to me happened to you.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've got to take responsibility. So it's like, hey, I'm responsible. Everything that happens, I'm grateful for it. It happens the way that it's supposed to. I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to grow from it. I'm going to become a better man as a result of every single thing that I've done. And that's the attitude that, in my experience, I have to have. And when I have that attitude, like, I'm good. And there's nothing, it doesn't mean that things aren't tough. And it doesn't mean that I don't go through things that are challenging and hurt me emotionally, and I get angry. I mean, shoot, I was running this morning, and I was running with my dog, Wayne, and there was a car that was about to pull out and turn left. And I stopped because it didn't seem like he was really paying attention to me. And he saw me, and then I ran by him, and then he pulls out and he rolls down his window, and I pull out my AirPod to hear what he had to say. And he looked at me and he said, "F you and your stupid effing little dog." And this is like a 16-year-old. This is like a 16-year-old kid. And I'm like, I'll tell you what, man, I almost freaking lost it. And I was like, "You little shit, why don't you turn around and come back here? I'm gonna beat the hell out of you." I don't know. It was just, I don't even know why did I go on that story? Why did I start talking about that?
Well,
story?
and I think, Tim, we still, I mean, the funniest thing to talk about in an AA meeting is people driving and getting triggered on the road, right? So,
right.
Yeah, life still happens, right?
Yeah.
But, you didn't end up fighting that young kid, right?
Yeah, I would have smacked the shit out of that kid.
Yeah, you don't have amends to make.
Yeah.
And yet maybe there's something you're going to take away from that experience about not giving your power away next time, right? And getting so upset,
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know where we were at with that, but it's a good
So
segue because we still stay sober even though life happens sometimes.
Yeah, life happens, things happen. Whatever he has gone. I mean, shoot, I can imagine myself that age doing something stupid like that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, who cares? He's a kid. And like, whatever, it's not a big deal. It doesn't have anything to do with me. It has to do with him, what he's got going on in his life, what he has going on at home. I mean, he's probably in pain. He probably, and through AA and through recovery and therapy and all of the other stuff that I've done, I've learned that, like, not to take it personally. And he has something going on inside of him.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why he was making comments at me. And I don't know, he was trying to ruffle my feathers, I guess. It kind of worked, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. But, and you hit on the biggest thing is, I've got 23 years sobriety, and sometimes I can get the attitude of, I don't really need to go to a meeting. And yet for me, the warning signs are exactly what you just talked about. Like, if life happens and I start snapping at people, or I'm ramming my horn, or I'm following someone on the road, it's like, wow, something's not right in here. Mm-hmm. And I go to a meeting and I share about it, and I get real. And it's like, I call it letting a little air out of the tire. I'm like, okay, I'm going to just, chill it down a little bit, because if I don't go to meetings and that stuff keeps happening, I'm going to drink. and then something.
And it might not be today, and it might not be tomorrow. It might not be next week, but eventually that's where it's going to, because it's the separation. The separation starts to happen, and it's like the crack in the Hoover Dam. It starts with the crack, and a little water gets out. And
my sponsor always says, it starts off as a spiritual relapse where I'm not in touch with God. I'm not having quiet time. Then it's an emotional relapse where I'm snapping at people. I'm not, I'm no fun to be around. And ultimately, the last part of a relapse is when we put alcohol or drugs in our body. Because
the physical relapse.
At that point, we don't have another choice because we think it's the solution we need.
Yeah. And you were talking about your sponsee, and you've got one sponsee that's sponsoring guys and another one that's not. And I can relate. I have two sponsees right now that I'm actively in the book with. And one of them relapsed back in January, and he wasn't sponsoring anybody. He stopped calling me on a regular basis. We used to meet every week. He's, I can't meet. I've got this, I've got that. And it doesn't happen like overnight. But then eventually he's not calling as often. We're not meeting. He's not going to meetings. He's not calling other guys in the program. And so you start to see the relapse before the relapse. And then he goes to Canada for 6 weeks with his girlfriend. He's quarantined for 14 days. He's not calling me. He's not texting me. He's not reaching out. Next thing you know, I get a text message from his girlfriend with a picture of all of the empty booze bottles all over her counter that she found in the trash can. And it's like, of course you relapsed. Of course. I mean, I already saw it. It was already happening. And then now, and he's back in the rooms and he's sober again. And he's doing great, actually. And he's sponsoring a couple of guys. And one of his sponsees calls him every single day like he's supposed to. And he's working the steps with him and he's doing everything. And he even said he came to the realization, which I got the realization as well. Working with a sponsee is how you stay sober, because you're accountable to somebody. You got somebody that's calling you every single day. It's like, it's the best form of accountability. Like, I got somebody that's looking up to me, that's calling me every day, that wants to continue working the steps. That's like, man, I don't want to let this guy down.
Well, and it's a lot of times too, if I say, okay, you got to read the 10th step, you got to read the big book, I have to do that too. If I'm going to lead them through that, I've got to be able to converse in it. So it is a beautiful thing. You can't ask, every time we work the steps with someone, we work the steps too. So it's a beautiful thing. And, I would just say also, I have moved 3 times in sobriety. I had a couple of years. I moved from New York to California. I moved a couple of years ago from California to Nashville, Tennessee. And the most beautiful thing about, being in any type of recovery program is you instantly have 25 to 50 phone numbers in your phone in the first or second week. So it is like, people talk about, oh, well, I moved. It's like, no, it gives you an opportunity to go to new meetings, meet new people, get a whole bunch of different numbers. And, by no means do I say do it, too frequently. And, certainly don't move early in sobriety, things like that make sense. But for me, it's been a lifesaver because my wife she's like, how do you know all these people? I grew up here and you know more people than I do. And, it's from going to a lot of meetings.
Yeah, I would say everywhere I go, I live in Arizona and I've lived here ever since I got sober, and it's the best feeling. I swear everywhere I go, I see people that I know, and a lot of people are in recovery, but some people I know from other communities as well. It's just a nice, it's a nice feeling, and being able to connect, because addiction, the opposite of addiction is human connection. So being able to connect with more people and people that I'm aligned with, which whether it's AA or one of the other communities that I'm part of, our values are aligned. And that's an amazing thing.
And just, because I know, you do a lot of great work out there with some sober living houses and different program. And, just this treatment center, I bring a meeting in every Monday morning. And it's amazing because I bring in a lot of men and women who are earlier in sobriety. Maybe they have a year or two. So they're sharing their story.
Yeah.
And the audience is really eating it up because they want someone who's a little fresher. You know, they want to know, you know, someone who's experienced recent drinking or relapse. But it's amazing looking at the people that really embrace sober living, that really do the work in treatment centers. It's amazing the success rate. You know, you can also tell people that are just there because their parents are, you know, for some reason they're forced to go and they're not engaged. They're not doing it. Maybe they don't go to sober living afterwards. They don't have a transition plan. And, you know, it's then all of a sudden I see them 3 months later. I'm like, shocker, you know?
Yeah, I'm shocked. Of course they're back. Of course they're back. It's like, you got to be all in. If you're not all in. However, I mean, hey, you've seen it. I've seen it. Sometimes it takes people a few times. They're not ready yet. And it doesn't mean that going to treatment was a waste. Yeah. It's just.
No, I have so much respect for people who keep doing the deal and showing up. I mean, there's one guy at our meetings, he had to have taken 100, 30-day coins. And, he has a few years today. And it's amazing. It took what it took. People that go to recovery. I mean, I have so much incredible just respect for the person that goes back to recovery yet again, that comes to an AA meeting after relapse and shares what it was all about, shares what, I'll call it the recipe for failure, because people in meetings need to hear what happens to people that don't go to meetings.
And that's one of the things for me, continuing to go back. I'm at over 11 years now. Yeah. And one of the things I hear, I've seen quite a few people that have been sober for 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, 12 years, 17 years. And what happens is that they disconnect. Yeah. They start living their lives and they start doing other things. And even if at one time, I remember there's a guy named Brent, he had 17 years, he was sponsoring lots of guys, he was going to meetings, he was doing the deal. And then he goes off the deep end and he relapses. Yeah. And everybody's like, oh my God, wow, how did that happen? How did that happen to Brent? And it's like, well, if you really look closely at what his life looked like leading up to the relapse, he wasn't connected. He wasn't sponsoring guys. He wasn't speaking at meetings. He was disconnected. And just because at one point he was connected, it doesn't mean that he was connected. The relapse, before the relapse happened, and you talk to people that are close to him, it's like, oh no, he was definitely going off the rails prior to the actual relapse. And that's what happens.
Yeah. And I'm glad you and I can talk about this, because yes, I have 23 years, you have 11 years, right? That's great. But I often say to newcomers, if you find somebody who you really connect with and they've got a year or two sober, but they're on fire, they're going to meetings, they're doing the deal, they're working the steps, don't look at it like you need to get someone with more time, because time is important, up to a point. Right. But I think it's so much more about momentum and how active is someone, what are they doing? I've met a lot of people with 20, 30 years. I don't want what they have. Right, I've met a lot of people with 1 or 2 years, and, they currently have better sobriety than I do. And so that lights a fire under my ass.
Yeah. My sponsor, he was actually my second sponsor. My first sponsor I had for the first couple of months. Yeah. And my first, I call him my real sponsor. He was my sponsor for 7 years. And he was very active in AA. He knew lots of people in AA, and he did the meeting before the meeting after the meeting. Right. He really helped me get connected. Yeah. And that was such a gift. Yeah. I'm so grateful that he was so active. And so that's what I would say is, to your point, doesn't matter if they have 1 or 2 years or 5 or 10 or 15 years, doesn't matter how much time. How involved are they, and how plugged in are they, and are they going to meetings, and do they have what they want? Do they have what you want? Yeah. And those are, in my opinion, the people that would be a better candidate to be a sponsor.
Yeah. And you mentioned the fellowship. And I think that is such a critical thing, because going to meetings is great, showing up a little early. But the amazing thing for me in my recovery, and I would say for the first 10 years of my recovery, my kids were young. I had a busy job. I came right before the meeting and I left right afterwards. And yes, I was sponsored and I did have some commitments, but I was not in 100%. And as the years went by, and especially when I talk about some of the things I went through, life events, getting involved in the fellowship was critical. Going out to dinner with people. I play golf all the time with people in recovery. Just finding those touch points. It could be meeting for coffee. I mean, Alcoholics Anonymous is the only place I found people to show up when I'm on moving day. Like when I'm moving and I need people to help me, alcoholics are the only ones that show up. It's amazing. It's other friends are like, I'm busy, blah, blah, blah. But AA people show up for each other. And a lot of that is the bonds that are built both inside and outside the rooms.
And, you talked about showing up for meetings, like showing up on time and leaving early, or showing up late and leaving early.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't know if it was Bo Eason that said this, the most successful athletes are the ones that show up first and leave last.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Less than 10% of alcoholics and drug addicts are going to make it to a year. And so it's kind of like you almost have to be the elite, like the best athlete on the field. Those are the guys, because most of them aren't going to make it. Most of them aren't going to make it, but the guys that make it are the ones that show up early and stay late.
Yeah. And
go to a meeting, show up early for a meeting, get a home group, get a service commitment, be connected. Don't look at your phone the entire time. Yeah. Don't go to the bathroom 3 times during the meeting.
Right.
Stay late, talk to a couple of guys.
Yeah. Put your hand out to the newcomers. I mean, it's amazing too, because the people that have come in the rooms that I maybe used to judge, like look at them like, oh my God, that guy's an ex-con. He's got tattoos all over. There's no way he's going to stay sober. Right. Yeah. And those are the people that surprise you the most, because the dedication is all in. And it's, I love how they say from Yale to jail. Right. So it doesn't matter where you went to school, and actually people that, nothing against education, but I think street smarts over some fancy education is actually a better recipe for success at sobriety, because people are a little bit more willing to adapt. They're humble. They're a little more willing. So I think, it's important things to keep in mind. It's a simple program. And when people make it more complex than it needs to be, that's when, they end up talking themselves into trouble.
How has outside help of other modalities helped in your recovery?
Sure. Yeah. I went to therapy for a while. That was helpful. Talk therapy, when my marriage was going down, went to marriage counseling, so I definitely did a lot of things outside the rooms. I've done a lot of like deep breathing, Wim Hof, things to kind of plunge my system. I've become a very active meditator. I started doing a transcendental meditation class, early in the morning. And so meditation, journaling, which we talk a lot about in the program, but journaling is incredibly important. I ended up going away a few times. I did some of these kind of ACA type childhood workshops. I went away to deal with some anxiety and depression issues. I've gone into the jungles of Costa Rica and, tried, some of the plant medicine and other things. And, and I don't advertise that, because obviously that's something that's it's a little questionable to many people in recovery. But, the reasons I did it was for a deeper knowing and deeper experience. And it was very helpful to me. So, there's a million different things out there. I love the way the recovery conversation has evolved around, meditation. I have a good friend who's a yoga teacher. She goes into treatment center. They do acupuncture there, so just different things versus just maybe traditional medication. So, that definitely can have a role for people, but I feel like a lot of these more alternative natural modalities can be really helpful as well.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And AA is just one route. And for me, that was my foundation. And I know that was your foundation as well, but there's a lot of other things. There's a lot of other programs.
Yeah.
There's other treatment programs. There's other alternative modalities. There's breath work, prayer, meditation, yoga, Ironman. I mean, like you name it, all of it's the point being that the work never stops. And in my opinion, it can't just be AA.
Yeah.
And if it's just AA, you're pigeonholing yourself into one community and one type of and you're going to get burned out. You're going to get burned out if AA is the only thing that you do.
I think that's beautifully said, because, there's a lot of folks, I live in Nashville, it's kind of in the Bible Belt. And so, there's a lot of people here that are very strong in their faith. And it's like, hey, that's great. If your church or your religious affiliation is really important to you, and that comes side by side with your recovery, good for you. A lot of people do a lot of the things you mentioned around, exercise and other things, but I absolutely believe that I did not get sober and go through everything I've gone through in my life to sit in church basements every day of the week and just go to AA meetings. Like, I want more out of life. Right. I want to travel the world. I want to jump out of airplanes. I want to swim to the bottom of the ocean. I want to go meet people and do fun stuff. And it is amazing how many characters who do so many different things you can meet in the rooms or around the rooms. So I think there's a lot of ways. I mean, look how you and I met, right? It wasn't at an AA meeting, but it was at something else that we're doing because we're trying to show up for ourselves and other people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is there a question you wanted me to ask you today?
I would say maybe about how it's impacted my family life.
Okay. So
yeah, I mean, we touched a little bit on my siblings. Mm-hmm. My siblings, I've got 2 brothers and 2 sisters in sobriety, and one other who's circling the drain. But with my kids, it's amazing. I have a 24-year-old daughter, Abigail, who I love. And, she's a kid. She went to school in New York. She lives in New York City. She's exposed to all those same elements that I was exposed to in my 20s. And, she's certainly had her dance at times with alcohol, but it's just amazing because of, she came up on stage with me when she was 10 years old and I got my 10-year chip. She's been to so many anniversary meetings. She's been to so many meetings, as has my son, Liam. They have an awareness around alcohol and, when it's working for you, maybe when it's not, they can come to me and have a conversation and they know where to get help. So to me, that's a beautiful thing. Is I really sponsor other men and I love men, but I do it because of the families. I look at their kids, I look at their wives, I look at what can happen in the lineage down the road. And I'm like, that's who I'm here to serve. Yes, I would love for this man to get sober, but right. I want him to go home and be nicer to his family, for his kids to see a different example. And it can absolutely change families' lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've seen it happen. Yeah. I've seen it break families apart. I've seen it bring families back together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the stories in the rooms around maybe people, through life events that have been distanced for their kids for decades that, that are reconnected. I mean, there's so many stories of hope and success in the AA rooms, people that get out of prison after 30, 40 years and they were sober in jails. I mean, bringing meetings into juvenile hall and jails is amazing. I mean, I had friends that would go into San Quentin in California, and lifers would have their own meetings, and they were sober. They were committed to it. So it's amazing the reach of this program, and not just AA, but sobriety of any form.
Yeah. Living the principles in all your affairs. Yeah. And if a person is living the principles in all their affairs, they're going to be a better person. The man I am today, I'm like, I love my life. And I think that people are attracted to me and people like being around me.
Yeah.
And I think you're the same. And it's anybody that's living the principles in all of their affairs. They're going to be more enjoyable to be around. And it's about creating value in life and being responsible, not being a victim, not being full of self-pity, being full of, direction and goals. And just like, we're all here doing the best we can. And life is great. Life is amazing.
Yeah, no, it's been beyond my wildest dreams. I'm so grateful and, really, really honored to be able to speak here today. It was very energizing.
Awesome. One last question I have for you. Tell me about your morning routine.
My morning routine is, it was interesting this morning. No matter, I didn't have a great night's sleep last night, but no matter what, I get up in the morning, get a glass of water, do a couple of things, but I go on this super wide couch that my wife doesn't love, but it's so comfortable. And I have it in my living room, and I sit and I have quiet time. I do a reading, I do some prayers, I do some meditation, I do some journaling. And sometimes I do all those things in a very quick way. Sometimes I only have 20 or 25 minutes. Sometimes I sit there for an hour and a half. But it's just that morning time to get myself centered. And during the day, I reach out to people in recovery. It could be a text message or a phone call or something. And so the morning routine is critical. The days when I do jump up and I have to run out right away, those are the days that, people are bugging me in traffic and other things. So
right.
It's such a different from the get-go, just having some time. And it doesn't matter what you do. You could literally sit there and stare into space, but just having some quiet time while you're awake to just kind of settle into the day. And that's the thing I try to impress upon all my sponsees. And I've noticed has an enormous impact on maybe not whether or not they drink or drug, but how they show up in life for their families, for work, for other things.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah. My morning routine is the most important thing. And it's so important in getting the day started. Yeah. And to your point, if I'm jumping out of bed and running out the door, the day's just not as good.
Yeah. And there's a lot of folks that, you can have young kids, you can have a busy job. I always say to guys, you don't have an excuse, get up earlier. If your day starts,
that's it. Get up earlier.
You can create the time. Just get up.
You're not going to die because you slept for 30 less minutes.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
So how can people find you if they wanted to find you?
Sure. Well, you have my email information. I'd be glad to provide that to somebody who I can help in some way. Yeah. Whether it's recovery related or, I help out a lot of men that just go through some version of what I've gone through. It could be an identity crisis at the end of their career. It could be just in the fast lane for far too long. And, all of a sudden they want to slow down. And I've just had a ton of life experience with all sorts of things, recovery related and other just incredible alternative health related. So absolutely glad and on Facebook as well.
Awesome. Okay, well, that does it for our time with Tom O. Before we end this episode, I want you to go to the review section on iTunes or comment section of YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or wherever you're watching, and type in the one thing that resonated with you that you heard today. Every comment counts, and what you share could resonate with someone else that is struggling and potentially save their life. So go ahead and share the one thing that resonated with you in the review section or in the comment section of YouTube or wherever you're listening. It'll take 60 seconds out of your day, but what you share could not only save you, but it could also save someone's life. Okay, that does it for the week. I'm Tim Westbrook, and I hope that our paths cross again in the next episode of I Love Being Sober. Tom, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I had a great time. I learned a lot about you, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Tim, thank you so much for all you do. Thank you very much. All right.
If you found this video to be of value, be sure to like it, subscribe to our channel if you want to see more videos, leave a comment if you have a question, if you've got something to say. Camelback Recovery provides treatment services for people struggling with mental health, mental illness, addiction, alcoholism. So if you or someone you know is struggling, be sure to reach out to us. You can go to our website, camelbackrecovery.com, or our information is in the comments section below. And we provide everything from detox, inpatient, outpatient treatment, sober living, recovery coaching, sober companion services. So either we'll be able to help you or we'll be able to refer you to people or treatment centers that might be a better fit. So I will see you in the next video.